Hello and welcome everybody. Today we are teaching on podcasting. Podcasting. Why podcasting? Well, let's start from the beginning. About, I'll say 5 or 6 years ago, I was running my own Facebook page. I used to do Facebook content. And somebody randomly reached out to me and said, I would love for you to work with me as a co-host for one of my endeavors as doing podcasting. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I've never done podcasting, so let's just see what this works out to be. So I ended up connecting with the woman. We worked for 3 episodes, came out with a little bit of content, and something happened and we never really got back to it. Fast forward. A few years later, I was sitting in the Whole Foods and I decided to pick up my phone while I was sitting in a lounge. I was thinking about something and I just decided to start recording. I recorded the first of what became 8 episodes of a podcast that can also still be found on my website. And I went from there. When I went from there, it took another year for me to really flesh out what it was that I wanted to do. But I ended up coming up with a concept after having a conversation with a gentleman, and I recorded 3 20-minute segments, which I broke down into parts, edited, added music, and I pretty much came up with a regular radio show. It came out to be a full 3 hours of content, but I could not save it. So I ended up storing it on what I was using to save it at the time, and I tell you now, I do not have access, at least at this time, to that account to get to that stored episode. But God has a way of making things happen for your good. I was inspired through help, through coaching, through assistance, through fleshing out. I ended up coming back last November and I started my prior podcast called Afrocentric in the Mix, which was, let's see if I can find it. This was one part of Afrocentric in the Mix, but I have another page, if I can find the page. There it is. This was my first podcast, Afrocentric in the Mix. This set of episodes right here was the series of episodes that I put together that I first came out with when I developed the podcast initially. I talked about money, I talked about my mission. I talked about my creativity, my favorite quotes, and some of the other episodes that we discussed. This was my first podcast that I did that I actually really started to grow with. And I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. We ended up coming out with, by the time we were done, it was 51 episodes, which can be found. They're here, but they also are on Anchor, Stereo, Google Cast, amongst many others. And these were the first episodes that I did when I did my first endeavor from November through, I forget when the last date for this podcast was, but it came out to August 3rd, 2021. But it was multiple episodes that we did. I think it came out to 51 episodes after all of the episodes were calculated between the two platforms, because something I did find out, Spotify and Anchor, if you're posting on Anchor, it will not post if you put music in it. So in order for it to post on Anchor, I had to do it without music. In order for it to post with music, it had to be done, I had to put the music in, and it would only post on Spotify. So I had to end up doing 2 sets every time I did a new set of episodes. But this was where I started with podcasting. So from here, after much thought and transition, I came to the name that you see on the podcast front cover band that you were just looking at. Steam to Live the Dream. This is the newest podcast that I've created as of recently. Steam to Live the Dream. It was developed from the transition of content from before to now. I had an in-depth conversation with my mentor and coach about my content and trying to streamline the direction of what the content was saying and where it was going. And we came up with this, Steam to Live the Dream. Steam to Live the Dream is that next phase. It was like Afrocentric in the Mix was my introduction to what it was I wanted to do, but Steam to Live the Dream, now that was the catalyst to what is being built now. And this is what we launched recently. Same 8 episodes are still there, but I just went into a new direction. We talked about the money, we talked about all of these things, the mindsets, and still the music, and the top quotes, and the top episodes for what we were doing at that particular time. But we revamped and we rebranded. So Steam to Live the Dream is the new direction of what we are doing with the podcasting. So why am I here? Why would I even be discussing any of these things with you guys? What was the point? Why do this? Well, for me, Steam to Live the Dream was a passion of mine that came from a place of being able to get out there, get my voice out there, get my sound out there, figuring out who I was, what I wanted to say, how I wanted to say it. And I've come to the conclusion that there are many people like myself that desire to speak on, help other people through talents, gifts, transition, shifting themselves from one place to another. But a lot of them don't know how. I'm going to dig a little deeper as we go forth, because in this past 18 months, we have discovered sides of ourselves that we never thought we would see or ever thought that we would have to experience. And the one thing I saw happen most prevalently with everyone was this: they were seeking and desiring to speak, to keep their brands, to open their mouths, to do something different. And you saw podcasts popping up like popcorn out of nowhere. Everyone had a podcast. Everyone was developing their own podcast. Celebrities have developed their own podcasts. People are coming up from everywhere talking about podcasts, 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 podcasts. Top two I've seen most recently was someone that we know very well, Sierra. She developed her own podcast. It hasn't been that long. It was sometimes toward the summer of last year, I believe it was, right after her son was born. And her and her husband developed this podcast, which you see her speaking on and speaking and interviewing her closest friends about multiple different topics. She's got up to 24 episodes, talking, doing interviews, so on and so forth. And another person that I found was also doing podcasting, at least I partially enjoyed some of hers, Tamar Braxton. Now, I'm not going to go in depth. I'm going to come back later in the midst of development as we discuss development of podcasts. But these are the things that I've been seeing happen. People are really just becoming drawn to the idea of podcasting. It's the new hottest thing as we are transitioning in this season to a new thing. So Steam to Live the Dream was, for me, a opportunity and an open door for me to share my thoughts, my viewpoints, and my vision. But what if I could take what I've developed, what I've learned, my ups and downs, my pitfalls, my understandings, and I could actually help you take an idea and develop your own podcast, taking the skills that I learned in podcasting while taking my business experience and showing you step by step how to go through and develop your own podcasts from concept to development. Would you be interested in that? If so, stay tuned because we're about to get started in the process of helping you develop your own podcast. This is Taj McCameron. Till our next episode. Bye-bye.